Since there is a delay of 30-40 seconds, we need to wait till we get that output.
And how I could have the questions, the one which
Yes,
in
sir.
the
You can simply open this Word document and...
I have to keep on swapping.
No need, sir. From here, already you are live only, sir.
Okay.
I'll be here, sir. Once we'll finish this, till then I will wait here, sir. Then I will go.
Shall I start?
Yes, sir. You
now?
can start, sir. Yes, sir.
Welcome you all for the live session. So the very first question has been asked by Ms. Shruti Sahu. So what is homeostasis and system integration? So homeostasis, in a very simple way, is that a system has to maintain a balance in terms of you can stretch a system to a certain point or you can bring down the system to a certain point of activity. The control mechanism by virtue of which a system maintains its extension limits, upper limit and the lower limit, falls under homeostasis, and rest of it we have already covered in the lecture. And in terms of the system integration is that when there are multiple systems which are working, say for example you have the brain functioning, you have the immune system functioning, you have a digestive system which are functioning, so they are all acting in harmony, in coordination. That coordination is brought about by different control elements which are present in the system, and that falls under system integration. Okay. So the next question by Kritana PK, which text we should read for reference? So there are several texts. Guyton is one of the very authoritative texts. Guyton's Physiology, Medical Physiology. Gannon's Medical Physiology is another book. These are some of the very authoritative textbook which you can refer to. The third question by Ms. Akhila S. Exam pattern and methods of approach towards exam. So the exam is multiple choice questions, and exam pattern to approach will be simply think calmly, clearly, and do not accept anything without logical reasoning. Okay. The fourth question is by Ravi Saini. So I want to ask some question. Which molecules are responsible for skeletal progenitor migration? How it is possible? This is the first question. And the second question is, what is the method and signaling of neurotransmitter formation, and why different neurons have different neurotransmitters and how they select it? Okay. To answer your first question about the skeletal progenitor migration, so the molecules which are responsible for the migrations are kind of, it's something like a chemotaxis. So there are molecules which permits the migration of these things. Mostly these are extracellular matrix proteins which are secreted along the pathways where they migrate, and chemotaxis is a process where they get they move towards a particular direction. That's a chemotaxis, chemical taxis, you are moving towards it. Mostly if you go through the molecules which are involved in extracellular matrix are the ones which are responsible for it. Well, talking about what is the method and signaling of neurotransmitter formation. So if you look by the way transmitters are being formed, initially, as per our present understanding says, most of the neurons have the ability to synthesize all different kinds of neurotransmitters till they find out their locations at different places in the brain and outside the brain, in the other part of central nervous system as well as in peripheral nervous systems. And depending on its position and its genetic predisposition, they synthesize a specific kind of neurotransmitters. And the synthesis of neurotransmitters is happening in the cell body, and it is being transmitted along the axon to the terminals from where it is being secreted. Now, talking about why different neurons have different neurotransmitters, it is almost like asking why we have 9 different digits. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that we can combine these numbers to make different kind of numbers. Okay. So similarly, body has this different neurotransmitter to code different kind of signals by mixing and matching. If you have 9 neurotransmitters, then you can make different kind of permutations and combinations to convey a specific message. So it's a mode, it is the alphabet of transmission of or making of informations. Okay. Now Aruna Devi K. So there is no question as such. Vikas Kumar Das, week 5, 6, 7, there is no question. Priyanshu Saini, there is no query. And A. Kaushega, there is no query. Mr. B. Meena is a faculty, there is no query. Mohammad Asif, who can Alzheimer's disease cause? So Alzheimer's is a neurodegenerative disease which mostly affects aging population, but that does not rule out that one cannot have an Alzheimer's at a younger age. So what essentially happens is that the hippocampal neuron, which are present in the deeper core of the brain, started to degenerate. And why they start to degenerate is still an unanswered question. And with that degeneration process, the connecting link between the hippocampus and the other part of the brain is getting sabotaged. So there is no further signaling of information from the hippocampus, which essentially is almost like a RAM of the brain, which picks up the first set of information, process them, and then they send it to different parts of the brain for storage. This is at least the current known theory. So from that point onward, this person is unable to really process information, and because the RAM kind of goes off, so you are unable to make sense of putting the informations in perspective. Now the next question by Ramaya. There is no direct question from lecture. Well, my point of having the lecture is that you should be able to, any subject, if you can apply it in day-to-day life, that makes the subject much more meaningful to anybody. So yes, I do agree, but that is exactly the strategy, that you should be able to apply physiology in your day-to-day life. From your hair to the toes, there are so many things which has direct relevance to physiology. Like say for example, Botox. It is one of the chemicals which are being used by so many of movie artists. But interestingly, it's a toxin which stretches the skin, and so many things it does. So it's a cosmetic problem, but it has a direct relevance to your neuromuscular junction because it blocks your neuromuscular junction. So we may ask a question, or I prefer to ask a question which has a direct relevance to your day-to-day life and how it affects your livelihood. Similarly, we use so many kind of deodorants. These deodorants contains a whole range of chemicals which influences the physiology. It may be an indirect question, but if you have understood physiology, then you will be able to answer these questions. Okay. Next question is Dr. Bhaskar P. Parvate, neurotransmitters working. Well, most of the neurotransmitters has a very simple way. They are kind of ligands which binds to a receptor, and by binding to the receptor, they open up XYZ kind of ion channels. It may open up a chloride channel, it may open up a non-specific cation channels. In the case of like acetylcholine, it goes and binds to receptors and it opens up non-specific cation channels. Similarly, GABA, which opens up the chloride channels. Thus, there are a series of such neurotransmitters which binds to their receptor and allows the movement of the ions across them, and by virtue of that movement, you change the membrane potential of the membrane, and that generates some kind of excitatory or inhibitory potential which gets transmitted, and that's how the information coding happens. So the next question is from Foram Shalat. There is no question. So the next question, boshdarshi@gmail.com, microbiology, then there is no question. Pooja, sir, the paper pattern is MCQ or MCQ at theory? It's mostly MCQ. Same question by Pooja. Then Rama Devi A has his teaching was so good. Thank you. Ambit M, osmoregulation in detail. Okay. Osmoregulation, I haven't really in depth, I haven't covered, but if you pick up any book on diffusion and movement of molecules across a membrane, so every membrane has certain kind of force which it exerts, which is called osmotic force, okay, which allows the movement of the ions across that membrane. So if you pick up any simple textbook, or even if you go to the Wikipedia or any other site, you will see very nice pictures of osmoregulation, which will give you a very clear idea of it. In case if you want, you can email me, I can give you this exact pictures what you needed for it. The next question is by Athira KP. Why acetylcholine related to onsets of Alzheimer's disease, not glutamate? Well, this is a very interesting issue and kind of a challenging issue in Alzheimer's disease understand campus. You will see most of the pyramidal neurons which are present in hippocampus are glutamatergic in nature. It means they secrete glutamate. And there is a small population which secretes GABA, which is the inhibitory neurons. Yet, there are other parts in the brain from where the projections happens in the hippocampus. So those projections bring signals from other parts of the brain or carry signals to the other part of the brain. Those projections which are coming on hippocampus from other part are mostly acetylcholine secreting neurons. And there are interneurons in the hippocampus which are cholinergic or acetylcholine secretion. So it has been observed that these projections which are bringing signal from other part of the brain to the hippocampus are not functioning properly. Now the point is, are they not functioning properly because glutamatergic neurons are not functioning properly, they are dying out and they are unable to pick up those signals, or the signals sent by those are missing, that's why the glutamatergic neurons are dying, is still a challenging problem. So with very certainty we cannot say, but we definitely know, as you have mentioned very correctly, that yes, acetylcholine has a link in the Alzheimer's disease, but exactly how is still a matter of contention out in the literature. Okay. Next 1 minute. Let me just okay. So the next question is by Krishna Jana K. Can you please elaborate the stretch reflex of muscle? Well, this I have discussed in depth in the presentation or in my lecture. So it's essentially whenever there is a stretch in the muscle, it has to come back to its original position. It does so by sending the stretch signal in terms of neurotransmitter dependent electrical signal or a wave to the spinal cord. There a return neuron tells it to bounce back to its original shape. But during this process, the one which senses this signal is a muscle spindle, which also gets stretched, which is also being brought back to its original shape. So essentially it's a way to ensure that the muscle regains its original shape even after stretch, and that's where it falls, a stretch reflex arc circuit. And you can go through the lectures very carefully. It's very thoroughly explained in the literature as well as in the lecture. So once again, let me go through. Okay. The next question is by Sonika Wasson. Okay. Need some guideline on the type of question pattern questions. So mostly these are MCQs. Next is by Dharanidharan D. I heard there are 40,000 muscles in an elephant trunk. How many muscles are there in human body? Dear Dharendran, I do not know the number, so I'll have to check. Please send me this question. I'll cross check. I do not know, and if you know, please educate me on this. I honestly do not know the number. Why is everywhere we are learning about human body in place of animals? Well, I understand your question. The thing is that there are two ways. There is a subject called comparative animal physiology, where we talk about different kind of animals and their physiology, starting from, say, amphibians to the mammals to the other form of life. But in this, most of the courses which are pure animal physiology, we take human being as a reference. But if you study, say, cattle physiology, then you can study cattle as a reference. And if you study comparative physiology, then you can take comparative physiology. So that's the answer. So unfortunately, as of now, I haven't started comparative physiology, but I'm planning to start a comparative physiology. And there I possibly will be able to address this question that, yeah, no, but I appreciate your question, because this is true, because most of the time we are only teaching human physiology, which is just a small part of the whole ecosystem, right? Mr. Mohan Kumar, Tamil Nadu, there is no question. Tanu Malviya, is regular proctored mode, can we write a paper? This you have to ask in the forum, dear. I am not in a position to answer this. Surendra Kumar Sunda, yes, there is nothing I could see. Tanmay Kumar De, nothing. Priyanka Mishra, class Nile, I'm sorry, I cannot answer this again. Monica Grover, greetings, sir. If you can tell us what would be the pattern, and also whether any sample paper, actually there is no sample paper. Also from books on animal physiology, Martini, Guyton reference, yes, Martini and Guyton, these are fantastic books, you should go through them. Vikas Paharia, about the topic physiology, how to use technology in this branch of it. Oh, good, I've asked this question. See, you think of dialysis bags. One of the classic case, if you understand kidney, you will be able to understand how to make a dialysis bag. One aspect. Heart lungs machine. If you understand the lungs physiology, cosmetic science. I just now mentioned Botox, cosmetic engineering, plastic surgery. If you understand the way the muscles are arranged and they are contracting, you can really you can become a very good plastic surgeon, which is one area of engineering in medical physiology. Similarly, prosthesis, from brain prosthesis to arm prosthesis to leg prosthesis, there's a whole area of engineering which is involved in it, especially in terms of digital signal processing, in brain waves decoding. There is a hell amount of work which is happening. So physiology is a subject which brings you very close to that interface where engineering merges with human body. Okay, so this is an area of future, and this is the area which will flourish till we as a race survive. Okay. Ultrafiltration kidney by Kalpana Mandvi. Well, I have talked about kidney. If you please go through the lecture, you will find that we have talked about how the ultrafiltration is happening, how the counter current mechanisms are helping it, and how the different set of ion channels along the kidney and their asymmetric distribution along the individual nephrons add up to the whole process of ultrafiltration. What is NLP? I do not know what is NLP. Sebashachi Mishra, there is no question. Pritika Agarwal, please explain ECG in detail. How is the heart rate measured in the health? Well, I have talked about the ECG in detail in terms of talking about the generation of the PQRS wave, and there I have told you that how the vector diagram Einthoven triangle is involved in it. But in case if you have any issues on it, if you refer to any of my course in electrophysiology or bioelectricity, you'll be able to get even much more details on that. But for the physiology, this is what I have covered as of now. Yeah, Murli Krishna, there is no question. So Now coming to, oh there, okay, fine. Okay. Okay. Murali Krishna, good evening, sir. Kindly, okay. Okay. Vishwajaya Raman, what causes induced drag? Okay. Do we need to study histology details before going for examination? Well, I'll answer first, Dr. Keshavan K. Do you need to study histology? If you know histology, it is good, but we do not expect really a detailed histology for the course. And Devil's Anonymous, what happens at the molecular level of actin myosin power stroke during eccentric contraction, isometric contraction? Okay. I will request you to go through the Martinez textbook about how these power strokes are leading to the eccentric contraction, isometric contraction. Though I haven't covered the isometric contraction because of the time shortage, but you can look through. This has been given in depth in that particular course. And now, Vishwajaya Raman, what is the cause of induced drag? Since this is a very similar question on the same line, I will ask you to go through Martini or go through these. There are a whole bunch of very nice explanation there, which is there. And in case if you find any problem, just email me. I'll send you the right set of links where you can go through this answer to these questions. Okay, now let me see. Good evening, sir. I'm unable to. Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, what is the next question? Sir, can we get a sample question paper? Kindly put it in the forum. Aminur Islam, is protein misfolding anyway related to oxidative? Some of the things what people speculate that there is a misfolding of the protein, especially tau and beta, and because of the misfolding, the cell has to continuously correct itself and it leads to oxidative stress. Yes, there are certain very interesting aspects which are kind of getting into the literature about this aspect. So that's true that there is a tremendous amount of oxidative stress which is happening. Ghazla Kader, there is no question. Okay. Dear sir, this is Dhanendra Singh. Dear sir, I want deep knowledge about dialysis techniques and machine. Well, I mean, read about the kidney and well, if you want to really go in depth into the detail, you probably need to. There is a very nice picture I can tell you in the Martinez book, but from there you really have to pick up about to know how these different dialysis bags are being made and how this dialysis machine works. MLT lecture, how can manage neurons in organ transplantation? How can we manage? Well, MLT lecture. So your question is how can we manage neurons in organ transplantation? Well, our answer to this question is that it is very tricky. Whenever this such transplantation happens, the doctors continuously monitor that how much time it will take before neuronal activity kind of gets restored. And there are always possibilities it may not get restored so easily or it may never get restored. So these are some of the exceptionally challenging problems in transplantation. And I may not have any direct answer to this because this falls under that whole zone of chance in clinical sciences or clinical technologies that, it may work, it may not work, but still we do take chance. Dhyana Pullikoti, sir, why can't we find answer in the assignment in the videos? You have to put it in the forum because the questions are more application oriented, so you have to think. So does ALS and Alzheimer's disease are related to each other? Yes, Divya call, this is true. In terms of one aspect that in both the cases it is neurodegeneration, but the interesting part is that ALS remains concentrated in the spinal cord motor neuron, whereas Alzheimer's happens in the brain, and having Alzheimer does not mean that you may have a ALS. Same way, if you have ALS, doesn't mean that you'll have an Alzheimer's. So it seems these different colonies of neuron at different places of nervous system have different features of getting degenerated. Yes, both of them are degenerative diseases, but at different places of the brain. Devil's Anonymous, what doctors do when a patient comes with a nerve tearing due to accident? One of the things they do first is, to the best of my knowledge, again I'm not a doctor but I'm just putting my common sense in place, is they first of all try to reduce the inflammation, because there's inflammatory molecules which are generated at the site of nerve tearing, causes a lot of it induces a lot of inflammation in the neurons. So the first thing, they put anti-inflammatory molecule, ensure that the place where that nerve tearing has happened, you pull down the inflammation. Then they put, at times they put set of antibodies which binds to those inhibitory molecules which does not promote the neuron to grow, and in that process they slowly wait, allow the neuron to regrow at that particular part, and that mostly happens in the peripheral system. In the central nervous system it is far more challenging, and it's almost at this point there is no clear technology to achieve such feat. But yeah, this is how it works. So next question. Oh, one second. Okay, let me see what is the next question. How do doctors? Okay, next is Akanksha Venkateshwar. How are awake brain surgeries performed, particularly in epilepsy? Well, the interesting part of this thing is that brain does not have any pain centers. So theoretically speaking, it is possible that you can do a surgery, but most of these surgeries, let me tell you, are one of the major challenges with most of these surgeries are they are very prone to infections and many things. So yeah, technically it is feasible because you do not have any pain center, so even if you make a cut or something, it is not going to influence your sensations or anything. That is probably the best answers. But I mean, it comes with a lot of complications, which I'm not getting into. What's the next question? Let's see.
Students are yet to post.
Yet to post. Okay.
Yes, so
Okay.
that's right,
Okay.
sir.
Okay. Sure. So one more thing with that question, that how does ALS and Alzheimer's disease are related to each other? The pattern of neurodegeneration is very similar, though in the case of ALS, the majority of the causes of ALS of neurodegeneration is not known, except the superoxide dismutase mutant, SOD mutants, where your oxidative stress flares up. And in the case of Alzheimer's disease, the pathway of neurotransmitter movement is getting clogged, so the traffic is blocked in the pathway, which eventually leads to neurodegeneration. And visiting some of the other question, how can we manage neurons in the organ transplantation? That's a very interesting question by MLT lecture. So this is a very interesting aspect, that whenever you are transplanting an organ, how you ensure, because one of the major problem in the organ transplantation is that if it is a three-dimensional thing, the inner core is not getting sufficient oxygen, and how you can really do the connectivity. So one of the possible ways could be you could implant some of the conduit tubes through which the new neuron will travel along and will make the connectivities. But how much these are successful and how they do it is beyond my scope, because it is mostly falls under the regime of those people who does neurosurgeons or people who does transplantations. So, but I can never be sure. And then there is this another question by Dhanendra Singh, which I like, on a deep knowledge about dialysis techniques and machines. So one of the things you can think of whenever we talk about dialysis is that how, so your question can have a very broad implications. How we can purify salt water. Think of it. We have such a huge sea. How we can do so? If you understand that, how we can separate the NaCl from water, probably some of the answers you may get. How such technologies of understanding dialysis could influence our understanding of how we can develop such filters which will help us in strengthening our understanding, or will provide us technologies to handle people suffering from kidney disorders. So here's a new question by BT Siddharth Subramaniam. How far are we from preventing further degradation of neuron from Alzheimer's or Huntington's to make sure that the respective patients can live pretty normal life? Well, Mr. Subramaniam, I will say as of now, the only nearest we know that there are a few drugs which may delay the degeneration of neurons in Alzheimer's by few years maybe, but leading a pretty normal life is, I wish we can see that at least in my lifetime, which is as of now it is not there. Like once they start to degenerate, it is almost like it's just a matter of time, how many days from now or how many years from now, and maybe months, years, or a decade. You can delay the process by putting a series of compounds. Some of them are antioxidants, some of them are other, but really to say absolutely a normal life is something still a dream. The next question by Dr. Keshavan K. Sir, please explain physiological stress problem at high altitude areas. So high altitude means you are climbing up, your oxygen tension is reducing, and as a matter of fact the oxygen layer is decreasing, it is becoming thinner and thinner. So your body is not getting sufficient oxygen. If it is not getting sufficient oxygen, essentially what will happen is that doesn't receive sufficient oxygen, transient memory loss, and your muscles won't be able to act fast because they are not receiving sufficient oxygen. So think of places like high altitudes where probably we are having conflicts with our neighboring nations. Those places, even for the soldiers to survive, is extremely challenging because there is so low oxygen tension, so low oxygen as well as low pressure. So what is happening is that you are under low pressure and low oxygen tension, and that leads to serious hypobaric hypoxia. And that hypobaric hypoxia pull down your efficiency. You may suffer from memory loss, you may suffer from all sorts of cognitive disorders and physiological problems of handling that kind of situation. So where you are, you can think what all sorts of problems you are going to face. So automatically it will lead to a lot of oxidative stress and free radical damage happening, and you may at times can affect your vision also. Okay. Now next question by Ghazala Kader. How the Parkinson's disease is similar to Alzheimer's? Are the two same, different? If yes, or how? Okay, but simplest way to understand is that Parkinson is involved in movement. Parkinson patients have challenge in the higher motor neurons which are present in substantia nigra starts to die off. So they fail to send command to the lower motor neurons which are present in the spinal cord area. And the neurons present in the substantia nigra, those higher motor neurons, they degenerate. So a patient suffering from Parkinson has movement disorder. On the other hand, in the case of Alzheimer's, as I mentioned earlier in one of the questions, the hippocampal neurons are dying, or the projection of the acetylcholine memory loss. So it is exactly the same thing. A previous question which was asked, what is the difference between ALS? So I add now ALS, Parkinson, Alzheimer's. These are different colonies of neurons, but they all die in these three diseases because of degeneration, neurodegeneration. But the degeneration happens in a different pathways, following different pathways. So one is exclusive of the other. So if somebody has an ALS, doesn't mean that they will have a Parkinson. If somebody has Parkinson, doesn't mean that they will have Alzheimer's, or somebody is unable to move. In ALS, you are unable to move. Okay, but the cause of our two movement disorder, whether it's Parkinson or ALS, is entirely different. Okay, so next question. Thank you for answering my question, sir. The truth is difficult to perceive, but I hope that in my generation, better drugs may produce. I sincerely wish, Siddharth, at least prevent the degradation. How can we relate to hyperhidrosis with nervous system? So if I understand what is hyperhidrosis, hyper means up, hydrosis means accumulation of water. One of the ways, if I'm understanding it right, so if I'm wrong, correct me through an email. If it is a hyperhidrosis, one of the ways you have to pump out the water. Possibly such thing may happen either because of some pathological conditions or inflammation or malfunctioning of the water channels. So one way could be you siphon out the water by putting a cannulation and remove that hyperhidrosis situation. This is what I'm guessing, but if I'm wrong, I am Umamashri. Okay, whether schizophrenia patient would we die with heart attack, sir? Okay, this is a very interesting question. So, Dr. Maheshwari, it is interesting that most of the patients, or actually, so there was a time in my life, almost 3 to 4 years, I do not have any published data as of now. This is back in almost I will say 16 years back. I used to work in a morgue where I used to get these cadavers just. So within 1 hour I had to do a series of procedures. Could we make them survive and not? One very interesting thing I can kind of share from my experience of those dead hour of nights in a morgue for almost 4 to 5 years of my life is most of these patients used to die of heart attacks. I have no clue, and I always wondered. So nobody dies of Alzheimer's. Similarly, I haven't heard that many of these people who suffers from like schizophrenia, they can always die of heart attacks. But why is there a link? I do not know, dear. So Dr. Keshav K, is Parkinson's disease related to trembling limited to hands? That is definitely one. It could be even any other part of the motor neuron system, which is the legs. It could be anything. Okay. Dear participant, kindly post your queries without much delay. In that very, very depth, what nitrogen does. It does something amazing. Just look deep. This is another from a very personal experience of life, talking to the people who used to work on submarines. So in very early days in submarines, they used to see the nitrogen. I promise you are going to enjoy. At deep sea, since I've asked this question, it just reminds me of one of this instant while I was moving, kind of learning about the submarine, inside a submarine. And I learned all these things. Very interesting. It was just a chance opportunity to figure out all these things. So look into it. And blood-brain barrier, in those extreme physiology, when you talk about deep sea divers, especially those tough people who work in submarines and they have to go out in deep depth, and how they prevent themselves and what all is to be done. So yeah, to answer anything effective physiological limits, you can be structures, whether it is the lungs, whether it's blood-brain barrier, whether it's the heart, whether it is any other place, it is going to affect you. I don't know if I answer. Okay, Abhinandana, you just send me this question. I will exactly send you. Just do it tonight, so that once I will finish, because I do not have anything to write at this point. So I'll send you the answer, but please do email me in manakd@iitk.ac.in. Post your questions. So any other important question? I'm just kind of okay. Murli,
Yes, sir.
as of now, I think I'm tracking the question right.
Right, sir.
There's as of now. Yeah, thank you. Think physiology in your day-to-day life. That will help you. Take care. Good night. And stay safe.